This is Augie Macro with Cryptid Creatures. Today, rather than talking about a new cryptid, we are going to revisit an older cryptid that we had discussed in one of our previous episodes. We will uncover new evidence and evaluate old accounts in order to uncover the truth about one of the most terrifying urban legends in U.S. history, the Mothman. The Mothman is often described as being a large, 6-foot-tall, bird-like creature with black or gray skin or feathers, large 10-foot-wide bat or bird-like wings, glowing red eyes, the ability to take off of the ground without flapping its wings, simply elevating itself into the air like a helicopter, as it is often described, and being able to fly over 100 miles an hour. Here we are once again in the small town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, at the convergence point of the Ohio and Kanawha rivers. Though the town is known for the 1966 to 1967 Mothman sightings, as well as the Silver Bridge collapse on December 15, 1967, the deadliest bridge disaster in American history, the site of the town has been known for strange mishaps, bad omens, and mysterious phenomena for hundreds of years. Native Americans told stories of thunderbirds, which they described as large black bird-like creatures that often brought about omens of doom, and held a similar position in their culture as the Mothman does today. When English settlers began to move into the area, it brought about many land disputes between the natives and these settlers. One of which being Lord Dunmore's War, which occurred in 1774 between the colony of Virginia and the Shawnee, Mingo, and Wyandot tribes. Its major battle was the Battle of Point Pleasant, which also occurred in 1774. For more historical background, we visited Fort Randolph, just outside of Point Pleasant, to learn more. Here we are at Fort Randolph in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The original fort was built in 1776, 2 years after the first Battle of Point Pleasant, the major battle of Dunmore's War. It was also the site of Chief Cornstalk and his son's murder in 1777.
My name is Zach Mason. I've been reenacting here for Fort Randolph for about, I want to say 4 or 5 years now. The fort was manned by members of the 12th Regiment of Foot, fell under Captain Arbuckle's command with his second, Captain William McKee. The fort lasted from 1776 until 1779, when it was later abandoned by order of Continental Congress. The fort we're currently standing in is a reproduction that was built in Crowdale Park in 1974 to commemorate the first Battle of Point Pleasant, and has been here ever since. I actually portray one of my forefathers, Lewis Tackett, during our annual siege of Fort Randolph. It is our biggest event that is every third Saturday of May. It commemorates the siege of Fort Randolph, also known as the Second Battle of Point Pleasant, where a conglomeration of Shawnee, Wyandot, and Mingo warriors attacked and laid siege to Fort Randolph in retaliation for the death of Chief Cornstalk just a few months prior. When the fort was being constructed, tensions began to flare between the militia and early settlers and members of the Shawnee tribe. The Shawnees saw this as an infringement on their lands, as they regarded the lands that are currently West Virginia as their hunting grounds. So the Shawnee Council sent Cornstalk, their active war chief, to discuss terms with the militia. It signed what is the Treaty of Tuindewee, or the Treaty of Point Pleasant, which regarded that members of the militia, as well as any settlers, would not infringe on any more native territory. The Ohio River would act as a boundary separating the two, and the Shawnee, in return, would not encroach into settler land. Until a company came from what is now Fort Pitt, Pittsburgh, under the command of Captain Andrew Hall. Captain Hall and his men had previous run-ins with the Shawnee. Hall's family in particular suffered greatly under the hands of the Shawnee tribe. There are some reports saying that his wife and kids were killed by Cornstalk himself. Hall originally protested the captain. The captain refused any of his actions to remove Cornstalk and the Shawnee from the fort or to cease any talks, until finally, about him and several of his men had had enough and decided to charge the fort while they were having a meeting with Cornstalk regarding settling disputes in the area. They jumped Cornstalk and murdered him along with his son right in the fort. Though there are some reports say that he was killed in a cabin not too far outside the fort. The curse of Chief Cornstalk. I've heard this several times myself. We've heard many visitors talk about it. Unfortunately, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, there is no evidence of Cornstalk ever reciting a curse before being killed by Hall's men. Well, I'd just like to say, if anyone is interested in 18th century living history events, Fort Randolph is open. We highly recommend you come and pay us a visit. We'll gladly have you. All right then.
As we move into the 1800s, many of the immigrants coming into this region, particularly Irish and German, bring stories of banshees and Schnellergeist and corpse birds, all of which bring about mischief and doom. And these stories, merging with the stories of Thunderbirds, create the genesis of this grand legend, the Mothman. In 1914, reports of a large, black, red-eyed bird with a 10 to 15-foot wingspan began cropping up all across West Virginia. The creature was soon dubbed the Big Bird, and stories of it continued all the way up to 1966, where they merge with the 66 to 67 Mothman flap. Many believe that the Big Bird and the Mothman are one and the same, and it simply got a new name. From November 15, 1966 to December 15, 1967, sightings of the Mothman spread like wildfire throughout the Point Pleasant area, frightening hundreds of people and climaxing in the collapse of the Silver Bridge on December 15, 1967, submerging 75 cars and killing 46 people. This collapse would be known as the worst bridge disaster in American history, and soon after, Mothman sightings virtually stopped. However, this is likely due to the fact that the entire town was more focused on the disaster than on the Mothman, leading to less people seeing it and less focus being put on it. In the following year, however, Mothman sightings began to pick up again, with them gaining frequency in the 1970s and 1990s and still continuing to this day. However, with a lack of proper documentation, many of these sightings are overlooked and many of the details of the Mothman legend ignored. In recent years, the Mothman legend has taken a more positive turn, with the popularity of things such as the 1975 novel The Mothman Prophecies by John Keel, the 2002 film The Mothman Prophecies, the opening of the world's only Mothman Museum and Mothman Festival. Tourists from across the world have come to see Point Pleasant and its Mothman. The town of Point Pleasant has reaped the benefits of a newfound tourist industry, which brings in thousands of people from around the world who want to explore the town and see the Mothman for themselves. One of my goals for revisiting the Mothman legend was to analyze, to the best of my ability, all of the main hypotheses as to the origins of the Mothman. In order to illustrate this, I created an evidence board to show all of these possible connections. Through my research, I was able to uncover 5 main hypotheses as to the origins of the Mothman. The first of these being the idea of the omen, or the harbinger. This idea states that the Mothman, whatever it may be, is some kind of creature or supernatural entity that has arrived in order to warn or cause some sort of disastrous event. There are many places throughout the Mothman legend that support this, such as the Native American stories of thunderbirds, or even the Irish settlers' stories of banshees and corpse birds, all of which creatures that were known for warning of death and destruction. Even in places such as Norse mythology, crows, also black birds, are associated with doom and harbingers. And in Hindu mythology, there's the story of the Garuda, which also has a similar role, and is described as a half-man, half-bird being. There are also many historical accounts that connect to this omen hypothesis. For example, the Silver Bridge collapse of December 15, 1967, is often attributed to the Mothman, due to their proximity in time and space, as well as the fact that Mothman sightings in the area completely stopped right after the bridge collapse. In other places around the world, this has occurred as well, such as reports of Mothman being sighted around the time of the Chernobyl incident in Ukraine, as well as the Fukushima disaster in Japan, and even around the time of 9/11. Here we are at the Point Pleasant River Museum and Learning Center in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where the waters mingle. Aside from the Mothman, the town has known many disasters, from 4 major floods reaching over 50 feet high, to many boat wrecks, and of course, the infamous Silver Bridge collapse of 1967, killing 46 people, more than any other bridge disaster in American history. Even as far back as the Native American times, the local tribes avoided the area as it was said to be home to evil spirits connected to the confluence of waterways. Perhaps the Mothman is a harbinger, warning the people of this town of bad things to come. Or perhaps it is a shadow of the darkness that lies over this place. We may never know. The omen hypothesis has even been connected to World War II, which leads into another one of the hypotheses, 2 in fact. That being the idea of the mutant bird and the military experiment or bioweapon hypotheses. We had the opportunity to revisit the McClintic Wildlife Management Area, or TNT Area, just north of Point Pleasant. The TNT Area's history began in World War II with the West Virginia Ordnance Works, a munitions plant that manufactured explosives, ammunition, and other weapons for the war effort. The Ordnance Works also encompassed 8,323 acres of nearby forest and wetland, along with its many power plants, factories, storage bunkers, also known as igloos, and other buildings. It was functioning from 1942 to 1945, but was disposed of officially after the war and was utilized for the creation of, among other things, a landfill, an industrial park, the Mason County Airport, and the McClintic Wildlife Management Area. Since its closure, however, the TNT area has grown a more controversial reputation. The region has become known for numerous leaks of toxic and even carcinogenic chemicals into the soil and waters. Mutated animals have been found in the area because of it, and many people believe that the Mothman may be one of these mutants. A bird, possibly a large owl or even a sandhill crane as some have proposed, that had become genetically altered by the consumption of these chemicals and was transformed into the creature. Others believe that the Mothman may simply have been a mass hallucination brought about by hallucinogenic chemicals in the Point Pleasant water supply, and the mass hysteria brought about by the Cold War and the 66 to 67 Mothman flap. However, there are other, darker hypotheses that have arose from the TNT area. Here we are in one of the igloos at the McClintic Wildlife Management Area, also known as the TNT Area, just outside of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It is well known that the TNT area is extremely critical to the Mothman legend, as it is said to be the birthplace and home of the creature. Many believe that the Mothman is a genetic mutation of some bird species that was exposed to chemicals from the plant. However, others believe that the Mothman is of a more sinister origin. It is believed that while the plant was functioning, there were undercover experiments done using genetic engineering to create military weapons at this plant. And the Mothman may possibly be one of those experiments. Is this true? We may never know. While in the TNT area, we investigated another local cryptid, the Sheepsquatch. While in the McClintic Wildlife Management Area, we came across another West Virginia legend, the Sheepsquatch. The Sheepsquatch, also known as the White Thing or White Thang in the far south, is a humanoid creature that is said to terrorize the woods of Appalachia. It is described as having a Bigfoot-like stature with a dog-like face, large ram-like horns, woolly white fur all over its body, and a long hairless tail similar to that of an opossum. This creature was most frequently sighted during the mid-1990s throughout the Point Pleasant area, and is said to reside in the TNT area. Is this creature possibly another military experiment gone awry, such as the Mothman is to many people? We may never know. Around the same time and place as the Mothman sightings of 1966 and 67, there were many reports of UFOs, unidentified bright lights in the sky, flying craft, and even encounters with the extraterrestrial drivers. One of the most well-known being the account by Woodrow Derenberger of a being that he referred to as Indrid Cold. Here we are near Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where around the same time as the Mothman sightings of 1966 to 1967, another strange being was reported. It was known as the Grinning Man. The most well-known of these sightings being from a man named Woodrow Derenberger. He described that on the night of November 2nd, 1966, on his way home from work, a large craft landed next to his car. He then stated that a tall, tanned, grinning figure walked toward his car and telepathically introduced itself as Indrid Cold. Cold then stated that he meant no harm and simply wanted to learn more about the human race. At the same time, Derenberger had been experiencing other strange phenomena, such as lights in the sky around his home and strange voices on his telephone. Derenberger learned that this being was from a planet known as Lanulos in the Ganymedes galaxy. All of this points to either an extraterrestrial being or possibly a spiritual one, ghost-like in origin. Others believe that it is simply a man who had gone insane and was playing pranks on the locals. Is it true that Indrid Cold, the Grinning Man, was a far-off alien from a distant place? We may never know. Accounts such as those of Indrid Cold substantiate another hypothesis about the Mothman's origin, the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Some believe that the Mothman itself may be an alien that came here or was brought here by these aliens, these extraterrestrial craft that many saw around the same time. Another substantial piece of evidence that points to this is that of the Men in Black. Here we are in the small town of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, to discuss an unusual phenomenon associated with the Mothman legend, the Men in Black. The Men in Black are reported to be tall, humanoid figures with pale skin and no hair, wearing black suits, hats, and sunglasses, and behaving in a mechanical fashion. They're known for arriving at the scene of various out-of-the-ordinary events the world over and taking or destroying evidence in order to hide the truth. The first reported sighting of the Men in Black comes from June 27, 1947, after a man reported sighting 6 donut-shaped UFOs flying over the Puget Sound in Washington state. Since then, the Men in Black have cropped up in various locations and times, such as after the Dover Demon sightings of 1977 in Dover, Massachusetts, after the Kecksburg UFO incident of December 9th, 1965 at this very location, and after and during the 1966-67 Mothman flap in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Some believe that the Men in Black come from some secret government shadow agency and are tasked with hiding the truth about various unusual phenomena the world over. Others believe that the Men in Black are aliens themselves and come from some sort of intergalactic security agency. Others have even pointed to older stories of angels and demons for an explanation. Are any of these claims true? We may never know.
There it is.
The last and perhaps most fascinating hypothesis as to the Mothman's origin comes from a man named John Keel. He was a paranormal researcher at the time of the Mothman sightings of 66 and 67, and he spent much of his life devoting himself to the research of the Mothman. Through his research, he developed his own hypothesis as to the Mothman's origin. He stated that rather than the Mothman being some completely supernatural being, or something from this Earth, or even something from another planet, he believed that this being, whatever the Mothman may be, may come from some alternate timeline or alternate dimension. So it isn't necessarily from off Earth, some alien, but it's not from this Earth either. He dubbed it an ultraterrestrial, and the name has stuck ever since. He explains his ultraterrestrial hypothesis in more detail in his 1975 novel, The Mothman Prophecies. Thanks for watching, and in order to watch our previous and future episodes, visit the Cryptid Creatures YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, and tell your friends. Cryptid Creatures is brought to you by the Kitty Putters Union, Cobble Sound Recording Company, and my dad's show, Meet the Pressers. This is Cryptid Creatures with Augie Macro, signing off.